Hello there, my name is Jordan Leroy Hansen, also known as The Dev, and I'm here with a new series I'm going to start out, especially starting with the Guilds of Ravnica, which is called Jordan's Jank Drawer. Now, the main premise of this one is we're just going to talk about janky brews, or just essentially use this to talk about potential jank decks that I can try out, deck techs and such, and just people's contribution on trying some silly shenanigans. But for now, we're actually going to focus on, since Guilds of Ravnica is coming in a few weeks, we're going to focus on cards to Jank Brew that's coming from the set. Now, as the pointers here say, I'm going to restrict it to 10 cards. I'm going to make it specifically 5 of them will be guild cards from the specific guilds that are in the Guilds of Ravnica set. They're from a specific guild, and then 5 cards from different colors in Magic. We all know the colors: Swamp, Plains, Mountain, Island, etc. Etc., etc., etc. Now, I'm not going to say the cards that I'm going to recommend for Jank Brew are competitive cards, but I feel the brewing potential can actually provide some fun and potentially dynamic gameplay and challenges. Also, just let you know, this is my 2 cents, and potentially mostly this is going to come from a standard format perspective, though there are some entries in here that I am going to mention about its potential in Commander and other formats. So, with that, let's actually start with the guild janky cards. Now, if someone asked me what guild that I would most likely be associated with, it would probably be the Is It Guild, since I like to experiment, I like to do silly shenanigans. So let's actually start with a Is It Guild card. Specifically, the Beam Splitter Mage, red and a blue, for a creature Vidalcan Wizard. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that targets only Beam Splitter Mage, if you control one or other creatures that spell could target, choose one of those creatures. Copy that spell. The copy targets the chosen creature. The Is It love replicating results. So, this is obviously the bear of an upside, and most people are making the comparison that this is Zada. And while that comparison's true, and there is the fact that people are kind of disappointed since this is a Zada that can only target one thing, I think people are forgetting one little benefit to this card compared to Zada and other cards like it. It's cheap. I mean, with that cost, it is, to some perspective, either a 2 mana to 3 mana card. This is one of the cheapest Zadas that we had in a while. And I just feel like you have some potential to do some very silly targeting shenanigans. I mean, in Magic and Standard at the moment, we have a lot of target creature spells in all the colors, like being able to reanimate a creature when it's about to die, or even prey upon to hit a creature to make it fight something. And even just stuff where it's just basic combat tricks, like give it flying, give a creature haste, and such, or give it a temporary stat boost. I just feel like the potential there with how many powerful creature cards we have in Standard is potential to combo with this and a potentially very powerful cheap combat trick spell is something that I really, really want to try out. But honestly, I think the potential in this is probably in a janky teamer tempo deck. Kind of like have the powerful cards that you would have, like maybe a powerful creature that you would like. Oh, I wish I can give this trample or flying. Well, thanks to Beam Splitter Mage, all you have to do is target this, and you give this flying as well as the other target creature flying, which is really, really cool. It's a card that I am really, really wanting to toy with. It's just I feel like there's just a lot of potential janky shenanigans you can do with just the factor that you can target this and then just make a multiple copy of targeting spells. The jank is there, I'll say that. Next guild we're going to talk about is the Dimir. Another guild that most of my friends I know associate with, but there's one card that mostly people are looking at Commander, though I do think there's some standard applications for this, and that is Mnemonic Betrayal. 1 blue and a black for a sorcery mythic. Exile cards from all opponents' graveyards. You may cast those cards this turn. You may spend mana as though it's 1 mana of any type to cast those spells. At the beginning of the next end step, if any of those cards remain exiled, return them to the owner's graveyard, then exile this card. Now, one thing that people have been trying a lot in Standard is trying to make a mill deck a thing. And the problem with mill decks in general, when you're making your whole strategy based off mill, you don't really have a payoff besides the factor of, well, milling the opponent. Like, we don't have any, at least in the current Standard, a Jace's Phantasm, or any cards that help still protect ourselves, and even offer some potentially funny reward shenanigans if we go into a mill strategy. Monarch Betrayal pretty much is that if we go into a blue-black mill deck, kind of a good reward strategy. You mill your opponent a bunch of cards, you control the battlefield, then you cast this, and then you just cast any spells that can help you keep control, or even just some funny combo shenanigans to help you keep control, till where you get your overall mill strategy. The potential is there, especially in Standard. Now, obviously, this is mostly a commander card, and I will not lie if I say that I really want to put this in my Animatu deck since it was a mill sub-strategy, so there's just some temptation of having this, a few mana rocks, and say, oh, I don't know, Paradox Engine. Oh my, the janky, dirtily shenanigans. I cannot wait to try this card. But honestly, I think in Standard, if you're trying to play a blue-black mill deck, I do think this is actually one of the better payoff cards for that sub-strategy. In my personal honest opinion. Next up, let's go to the Guild of Boros and make people tilt their heads sideways. I'm talking about the Swiftblade Vindicator. Red and a white, Human Soldier 1-1, Double Strike, Vigilance, and Trample. Now, let's just get this out of the way. Is this a bad card? Oh my, yes, this is a really, really bad card. However, sometimes in a Jank Brewer's life, you just have to take a look at a card that you know that is bad, that you know is not the best card in the world, but you want to make it into a good card. You want to try to make a game out of it and try to actually make this card potentially powerful and actually protect it and actually go off with the payoff and make it a very, very big double streak vigilance trample. It is a dream. We shall achieve it. It shall be done. We shall try to protect it. And who knows, maybe with cards like Last Chance and such, and maybe ways to prevent us from losing the game, that's a possibility. And also just, honestly, if we can make this really, really big, this becomes a significant effect pretty quick. But still, it's a really bad card. I mean, literally, a cow can sneeze on it and it can die. So, that's just going to be the challenge of protecting this, and I think that will be just a fun challenge in Standard in general. Also, even though the card's not that great, the art itself is actually legitimately dope. Like, just the color contrast, the background, and just the flavor text in general. I like it. And I think I might just eventually try to make an aggro deck with this, or just try to make a Protect the Swift Blade deck, where we protect it to make it into a bigger creature and win with it. And sometimes, you just want to have silly shenanigans like that. Next up, the Gagari Jank card, which is another one that's going to make people tilt their head sideways, but in another way. Vraska, Gagari Cream, 2 black and a green for a legendary planeswalker Vraska. Has 4 loyalty, plus 2, you may sacrifice another permanent. If you do, you gain 1 life and draw a card. -3, destroy target non-land permanent with converted mana cost 3 or less, or -9. You get an emblem with, whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, that player loses the game. Now, there are some people that actually think that this has potential for being powerful in Standard, but it's being seriously debated. Some people say that this is a really bad card for Standard. Some people say that this is a really good card for Standard. Really, it depends on who you ask. Like, Notcha says it's a good card. There's also people who I know who play the game professionally that say the card's not bad. There's some that say the card's bad. Honestly, you can just skip a stone to any Magic player, and they could just have a flip of the coin opinion on this card. However, I feel like there's a fun challenge to try to develop a shield that synergizes with this card and maybe benefits, like with the +2 effect. You may sacrifice another permanent. Okay, so let's try to make a card that actually is aristocratic and synergize with, like, cards that synergize when they die. Like that one pirate in Ixalan that when it dies, you generate a treasure, or stuff like that. Cards with that potential benefit, and just benefits if when a creature dies in general, has potential with the power of this card. Plus, just the other activated abilities. Let's just be frank, for a Jank player, they want to try to win with the Victory Ultimate emblem. And that's just going to be a fun challenge to try to keep this alive for a few turns and try to get to that ultimate. That's going to be the fun Jank Brew challenge of the day. But I do think just developing a share just to make even just a standard viable deck in general will be a fun challenge in general, in my opinion. And last but not least, still one of my personal favorite cards of the set, and it's the Selesnya Jank card, Imra, Soul of the Accord, green and a white for a bear. We start with a bear, we end with a bear. And whenever Imra's Soul of the Accord becomes tapped, create a 1/1 right soldier creature token with lifelink. Now, sometimes this bear is just really card that I kind of loved at first sight. And the reason why I loved it at first sight is just it has very interesting synergies. Like with Song of Freyleys, if we go into modern with vehicles, and just in general, convoke spells in general, even ones that are being standard and other formats. Plus, it's also a 2-cost legendary, and I'm keeping my eye for cheap legendaries for Mott's Amber shenanigans. Am I going to make a Mott's Amber style deck with this and the other cheap legendaries we have in this color pie? Oh yes, you bet your money I'm going to try that. And also just the token generation ability in itself can be useful for multiple archetypes. Obviously, the first one that comes to mind is when you think of Convoke, because generate more creatures, which is used for Convoke and such. But it can also be used for other archetypes. Let's think about this. This can be used in a lifelink synergy deck, since you create tokens that do lifelink. It can also be used in aristocratic decks, because you can sacrifice the tokens and such. There's just so many little synergies and little janky brews that you can brew around this card, and that's why I legitimately adore this card, in my personal opinion. Well, we got through the guilds, now let's get to the color jank cards. So, we're going to go through the whole color pie and talk about what I think is the most funny jank cards of each of them. Let's get started, shall we? First up, let's talk about the red jank card, which is the Experimental Frenzy. It's free and a red for an enchantment. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. You may play the top card of your library. You can't play cards from your hand, and you can spend free and a red to destroy this enchantment. Now, this card, in my personal opinion, is just a really silly card in aggro decks, because let's be frank, there are moments where you're going to empty your hand, and you are just relying on the top deck. And I think this card is just a really good top-end for those aggro-style decks. Now, but that's more talking competitively. Let's actually talk about jank. What are janky ways we can brew around with this card? Well, honestly, there's just a lot of ways that we can manipulate with our deck to help synergize with this card. Let's think about it. We have things like Theater of Ruin, Evolving Wilds, like land manipulation to just alter your deck really quick. But there's also potential with synergy with cards like the Tutor card cycle that specifically happened in the Rivals of Ixalan set. Specifically, the one I'm thinking about is the Pirate Tutor, the free cost one that tutors a pirate from your deck, and then you put it on the top of your library. Keep in mind, top of the library. Hey, we can play, like on turn 6, that pirate tutor, and then we tutor for a cheap pirate, or maybe even a pirate tutor itself, and then play that pirate tutor, and then put another top on our deck and such. Just like little silly shenanigans like that. It can also synergize with that merfolk that brainstorms that came from the Rivals of Ixalan. So it's a wizard, so who knows? Maybe this could see play in a red-blue wizard-style tempo deck. I mean, there's just some really silly shenanigans the more you think about how you can manipulate with your deck to make Experimental Frenzy just a funny, let's go get the popcorn and see what happens. Or specifically, let's go get the brew of coffee and see what happens when we're really caffeinated. Woo! Anyway, let's talk about the black jank card. This time it's the Gruesome Menagerie. 3 and 2 black. For a sorcery that says, choose a creature card with converted mana cost 1 in your graveyard. Then do the same for creature cards with converted mana cost 2 and 3. Then you return those cards to the battlefield. This one is actually pretty simple. With just how many cards in Standard we have that have really unique into the battlefield trigger effects, the factor that we have those in a variety of colors makes me think that there's just some silly potential shenanigans, kind of like a brew of shenanigans of creatures you can return back and just their ETB effects going off all at the same time. The combinations are endless. Plus, at worst, there's just not some bad early value-based creatures to return back from this. Like, the one I can think of is the free black creature we're getting from this set that makes each player have to sacrifice a creature or a planeswalker. Simply put, play this card, you sacrifice the 1-drop, because maybe the 1-drop's not that valuable, and the opponent has to sack something. Simple, to the point. I mean, and that's just the easiest competitive option. There's just some silly shenanigans like, say, let me think of the more sillier shenanigans. maybe like getting the bond and then get like the free drop wizard, or there's like honestly, there's just a lot of things you could do with Naban and just free costs and one cost wizards that just might be just potentially silly to do with Gruesome Menagerie. Would it make Gruesome Wizards a possibility? Maybe, maybe not. And honestly, I think you just need to see the ETB trigger cards that you have in your collection, and then just also value based cards in general, and just have fun with this card. Because I think that's the main point of this card. It's just to have fun and do some silly reanimator shenanigans. Next up, the green Jank card. Now, this one I'm kind of cheating a little bit since technically this doesn't come from the set. You have to buy a box from this, which is kind of sad. But let's not kid ourselves. This is the Timiest card ever. The Impervious Great Worm, 7 and free green, 10 mana for a Convoke spell that is a 16/16 indestructible. Okay, let's not kid ourselves. Timiest card ever. Timmies like big creatures. They like indestructible big creatures. And boy, does it not have trample. But let's be frank, there are ways in Magic at the moment, even in the current standard, even with the rotation, you can give this creature trample. And the thing is, people are like, oh, it's 10 mana. But let's not kid ourselves. There are ways to get this out for cheap. I mean, we have so many reanimation spells that are at 5 and such that we could probably get this out by turn 5 or turn 6. And oh boy, the shenanigans you could get away with. But let's be frank, we all know what we really want to do with this card. We want to FUD it. We want to put this in a red deck, and we want to cast FUD, and we want to deal 16 damages to the face! Let's not get ourselves. That is the most Timiest thing we want to do with this card. But I think this is just a fun card in general, and I am still disappointed that this is the Biobots promo, because this is a really Timmy card, and I really want to brew some silly shenanigans with the Great Worm. Because it's a giant 16/16, and that art is gorgeous. Also, let's go to the blue now, with the blue Jank card, which is the only spell Adept. 4 and a blue, for 2 and a blue. Tap the creature. You may cast an instant or sorcery card from your hand without paying its mana cost, and it's a free form. Now, this one is pretty simple of the Jank shenanigans of this one. This one makes it that you can cast very powerful sorcery spells. Let me think of a couple. I don't know, like Apex of Power in Standard at instant speed for that low mana cost. That is legitimately absurd. And just with so many powerful, even that's the best case scenario. There's still like powerful 5 costs to even just 5 or higher or even lower, just spells that you would want to cast at 2 and a blue. I mean, there's just some potential really silly shenanigans you could do with only spell Adept in Standard. I mean, yeah, you have to protect it, which is going to be the tricky part, but if you can protect this, oh boy, go get the popcorn because you're going to do some spell swinging shenanigans. Especially if you have ways to untap this creature. Oh boy. And multiple mana, I cast a spell. I cast a spell. Cast a spell everywhere. Last but not least, one of my other favorite janky cards of the set, Divine Visitation. 3 and 2 white for an enchantment. If one or more creature tokens would be created under your control, that many 4/4 white angel creature tokens with flying and vigilance are created instead. The angels appreciated the offer, but politely declined to eat any birdseed. Now, in Standard, let's be frank, there are a ton of ways to generate tokens in multiple colors. Like there's Tezzeret in blue, there is Marshall, the pretty much the Morgan War Marshal of Standard at the moment. I think it's Infiltrator if I remember correct. And just other little stuff here and there in multiple colors. Green with Sapolines. I mean white with Soldier tokens. The fact that we can make potentially even white with Knight tokens. The potential that those tokens can now become specifically Serra Angels is very janky and very powerful. I mean, let's be frank. Serra Angel, classic Magic card, and there's just something really cool that if we can find a janky way to mess with this card, then we can cast multiple Serra Angels in the meta. And honestly, that is going to be a funny jank goal in general for token decks in general. Yes, it's a 5 cost enchantment that, for the technical most part, doesn't do nothing unless you have a cheap activator. But honestly, I think this card is just a really potentially powerful, but a really fun jank card in general. I think if there's a way to make multicolored token decks to play with Divine Visitation, I'm gonna try it, no sweat about that. And overall, those are my janky cards I am anticipating for from Guilds of Ravnica. Now, there are some that didn't make the list that I am still going to experiment with because the set does provide some very silly cards, and you're going to see some very silly janky decks from me in the future. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you like it, please like and subscribe. If you have any cards that you think have janky potential for me to brew around, you can leave it in the comments below. I hope you all have a lovely day. This is LevDev, signing out. Badoo!